if we all could talk to the crowd and make some kind of a take home for the Indian maritime pilotage to reconceptualize the entire thing into a much broader spectrum and coming out of those old laws that India's maritime pilotage and maritime sector is being governed at this point in time. This webinar is also unique because this is the first webinar of AMPA, and more than that, it's about the subject which is very close to the heart of AMPA. The AMPA's inception happened in thought process in July 2019 when we lost a pilot in Mumbai, Captain V.K. Gupta. And that sole incident accelerated the formation of AMPA, which was only in thoughts earlier, became on paper, came on solidarity of support of pilots. And of course, it was a pleasure doing that because it was about safety and security. And that sole thing became a motto of AMPA. Instead of starting with memberships and life memberships and founder memberships and things like that, AMPA went straight into the ground field, started working for the pilots. COVID happened in between when we were flourishing our circles to the pilots, and of course we negotiated for the COVID insurance for pilots and things like that. But then this was the first organization in India striving to be on the pan-India level. And I must thank all the fraternity whomever I spoke to in industry, be it FOSMA, be it MASA, be it CMMI, be it Nautical Institute, all the organizations in India, they all supported the venture very much. They all said to me, yes, this needs to be done. And I'm really thankful to them today. Because today I could do this because of their backup, their patting on my back to do it. Immediately, AMPA's government council was formed. And of course, the logo and things took place. And we immediately embarked on a pilot ladder mission. This mission has been going on in La for last almost 6-7 months in AMPA. We've been talking to MTIs, we've been talking to the ship managers. We also took it to the Digi Shipping for the focus campaign. We took it to the MOUs for our consolidated inspection campaigns. And it was all the time success because people were also very concerned about pilots' life. It was the trainings were taken very well by the MPIs and the ship managers. And today's seminar also is based on main 3 topics. These 3 topics are pilot ladder, pilot transfer procedures, and pilot training. And you would appreciate and notice that all these 3 topics, they culminate to the safety of navigation in ports. And this is what the AMPA's portfolio is. That we care about safety of navigation in port and all harborfront matters that happen in Indian port. We have 2 sessions in this seminar. First session is about pilot ladder and pilot transfer procedures. Second is about pilot training. And we have very eminent speakers. On the very first session, we have, Captain, I won't go with particular order as such, of what is given in the pamphlet or the flyer. But, in order of the liking of the subject, the passion given by the speakers to the subjects is enormous. That's what I said, it's a treat to hear them today. And there'll be so much to take home for AMPA, for India, and for Indian maritime politics today, that it will be a history. It will really create a history. Jane Drummond, Captain, she is a harbour master of Newcastle Port. Of course, Rajesh will introduce them one by one in the full biodata. But, she has done enormous work with respect to pilot transfer procedures in Newcastle Harbour. We have Simon Meyjes, who was the ex-CEO of Reef Pilot Association in Australia, has done revolutionary work in writing safety management procedures and safety management manuals for pilot operations. We have Captain Choubey from Adani Ports, who has been a pilot in various ports in India and has a lot to contribute. We have a sailing master on the first session. The need was felt particularly because to hear the other side of the story as well. When I went to MTIs for training, we always told them, you guys must have not seen the pilot ladder, how it looks from the shore. And here is the pilot who's giving you that view. And for this kind of seminars, we require to hear as to what sailing master perceives of all these policies and all these things, all the things what we discuss ashore. We have a second seminar, second session very well will be done by, Jeff Parfitt, who's the director of operations of Chirp Maritime UK. Chirp has huge followings and Chirp's work is very well known in the world. I'm no one to introduce them as such, but Jeff certainly agreed to take part in this, to take the incidences learning ahead to pilot training. Andrew Beazley, Beazleys are another iconic figures in Australia. They have started on their own the man scale model training for pilots, which is the future about the simulators, and he is here today introducing about the advantages over the man scale model over the simulators and other conventional trainings of pilot. Captain Karkare, of course, everyone knows him, I'm sure, in India for his contribution to the maritime fraternity and ports and pilotage. He's going to speak on the benchmarking of the pilot training in India and abroad. And of course, we have again Simon Meyjes. He's going to speak on a very particular subject which we discussed between myself, Ravi, and Simon in our earlier meetings, about a human factor that undergoes in pilotage and pilot-related accidents. We never think about this. And that is when, rather, I felt the need that all the pilots and pilot-related people in India must hear, what Australia has done. We don't have to reinvent the wheel again in India. We can learn from somebody who has been there, done that. Australia has gone through the entire same phase as ours 30 years back, as I hear from Ravi, Captain Ravi, of course, that when they started in 1988 with the revamping entire, pilotage and pilot laws and pilotage acts, etc. It was really, really, for me, for a person like me with so much of passion with maritime pilotage and to do something with the maritime fraternity, I felt really great to get that thing, get those speakers here and start this webinar. I would welcome all again to join this webinar, and we have a certain follow-up after the webinar. We're not going to shut our computers down and sit tight after the webinar is over. With the help of course, Chirp, CMI, Nautical Institute, we're going to have a small committee after the webinar and put those take-homes for the Indian Maritime Pilotage on paper, take it to the National Shipping Board, Indian Port Association, and Ministry of Shipping for the betterment. It's going to be all broken down in action points and, with the target dates, etc. We need your support. We need the fraternity support for this. And please feel free to ask any questions to the all stalwarts who want to speak for next 2 hours to you. I welcome you all again. Thank you for caring for pilots and maritime pilotage in India. Welcome all. Thank you, Rajesh. Over to you.
Thank you very much for the wonderful introduction, sir. It is now time for our first session of the event, Pilot Ladder Safety and Pilot Transfer. We have lined up a very distinguished panel for the discussion, and it is my honor to introduce the panel members. May I first welcome the moderator, Captain Ravi Nijjar, Principal Consultant, Marine Consultancy Group Private Limited. Captain Nijjar is a lead investigator in marine accidents. He has developed advanced maritime pilotage course for Australian port pilots and BRM third generation course. He is a Principal Consultant, Marine Consultancy Group Private Limited. Next, we have Mr. Simon Meyjes, ex-CEO of Australian Reef Pilot Association, speaking on pilot ladder safety and transfer procedures. Simon was Chief Executive Officer of Australian Reef Pilots for 9 years until 2020. ARP employs more than 40 marine pilots engaged in both compulsory and non-compulsory ships pilotage in the Great Barrier Reef, Marine Park, and bulk ports in Queensland, Northern Territory, and New Zealand. ARP's motto, Guardians of the Reef, has its roots more than 140 years ago when pilotage of square-rigged sailing ships through the treacherous Torres Strait was pioneered. Next member on the panel, Captain Sansarchandra Choubey, ex-pilot at JNPT, MBPT, Mundra, and presently Vice President at Adani Ports, speaking on pilot boat and boat pilot from a perspective. Captain Choubey started career with Century Shipping as a deck cadet in 1991. He has sailed with Century Shipping, Eurasia, and Shipping Corporation of India. He got command in 2004 and thereafter quit sailing for a career in pilotage operations. Captain Choubey has many firsts to his name. He piloted the first 300 and 336 meters container vessel to call Mundra Port. He has piloted the first fully laden Cape-size vessel to the newly commissioned West Basin Coal Terminal. He has also piloted the first 366 meters and the first 14,000 TEU vessel to call at any Indian port. He was awarded the National Marine Environment Protection Certificate by the Indian Coast Guard for being the first responder and leading the firefighting effort for extinguishing fire on board MT Janesa at Kandla Port Anchorage. Next on the panel, we have Captain Janine Drummond, Harbour Master for the ports of Newcastle and Yamba in New South Wales, Australia, speaking on pilot transfer initiatives that are a must for a port. Janine is an experienced master mariner and maritime professional, having successfully delivered safe and efficient port operations, including marine pilotage, DTS, ship scheduling, emergency response, and pollution prevention, pilotage transfer, operational audits, marine pollution prosecution, incident reporting, and investigation, as well as planning and compliance across Australian ports. Janine is passionate about using new technologies and shared learnings to continually improve best practices for our maritime and port sector, as well as being a strong advocate for improvement across all levels for diversity and inclusion in our maritime industry. Next, we have a sailing master, Captain Santhosh Rangan, sailing with Fleet Management Hong Kong, sharing his thoughts on master's perspective on master pilot exchange and pilot transfer. Captain Rangan has been a tanker master from end of 2016 on various types of tankers, in particular chemical tankers, and it would add a very relevant and contemporary perspective to hear from a sailing master and the challenges encountered. I now request our esteemed moderator, Captain Ravi Nijasa, to kindly introduce the topic and set the tone. Over to you, sir.
Okay, I'm unmuted. All right, I'll just say good day all in Australia. We say that covers good afternoon, good morning, and all the others. I'm very pleased to be invited to be a moderator at this inaugural event of the All India Marine Pilots Association webinar, Re-conceptualizing Indian Marine Pilotage, Maritime Pilot, sorry. I've been swept along, like most here, by the infectious energy and enthusiasm of Captain Karanjikar. The role of the pilots is crucial in port operations. A port can operate without a CEO for longer than it can in the absence of pilots. A pilot is a very high-value person in the port community. Most are not aware of the risks taken daily by pilots in carrying out their tasks. Even pilots don't like to think too much about the risks. Until fairly recently, multiple hazards in pilot transfer have been glossed over. This webinar is a serious attempt to put the spotlight on the multiple hazards in pilot transfer operations and find ways of reducing the risk. There is much more to safety in pilot transfer than just pilot ladders. For example, just today I learned that a pilot boarded the pilot ladder while still clipped to the pilot boat. There are issues relating to physical and mental fitness, grip strength, personal protective equipment, pilot boat and crew standards, etc. A panel of experts, each with their unique expertise, have been assembled to present their informed viewpoints on the issues that need to be addressed to improve safety in pilot transfers. In order of presentations, Simon Meyjes. I worked with Simon for 2 years in developing an SMS for the unique risks in pilotage operations. A considerable amount of time was spent on the pilot transfer operations. We even delved into the psychology of the pilot. Most pilots consider the pilot transfer a temporary inconvenience to get to their proper workplace. And I consider Simon to be an absolute encyclopedia on the subject of pilot transfer operations. He's done a study in depth. Then we have Captain Janine Drummond, and a pilot fell from a pilot ladder and very badly injured in Newcastle. As a response to this injury, Captain Drummond examined the pilot transfer operation in a very comprehensive manner and has come up with improvements at many levels. Under Janine's supervision, a video has been produced that has the potential to set the standard for pilot transfers. Then we have Captain Sansarchandra Choubey. He's an ex-pilot, and I can see he's a person with a very enterprising brain because he's an ex-pilot. He's come up with a very unique and innovative solution to pilot transfer operations by using a tug. So we're very interested to hear that. And what I found very interesting when I was speaking to him the other day is that the pilots like that. That's very important, that the pilots are comfortable with that. And then last of all, we have Captain Santhosh Rangan, and he's a ship's captain. And we'd like to hear his view about these very pesky and demanding pilots and what he has to do on the ship to satisfy them. All right, we'll start with Simon Meyjes as the first presenter. Simon?
Thank you very much, Ravi, and good evening, everybody. Welcome to the webinar, and I wonder if I can share my screen now. Is that visible to everybody at the moment?
Yeah.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Okay.
Not yet.
Yeah.
Is that now visible?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So just a very brief introduction because we're all very time limited. I don't intend to actually delve into the minutiae or the mechanics of the problems with pilot transfer. What I'd like to do is introduce some fairly high-level concepts and describe what I think is the workflow that needs to be undertaken by any port or organisation to actually develop safe means of work. And so I'll hop straight into it and try and leave as much time at the end of this for any questions. So I've listed my objective. I've listed the objective here as the prevention of personnel injuries and damage to port assets during pilot transfer operations. And this little flow diagram here is something that I've actually called up from human performance training, which I'll be talking to a little bit later on. But this diagram describes something which is very personal and pilot-centric, noting that this symposium is addressed to pilots, but pilots are in the middle of a system, and that system comprises people, programs, processes, the work environment, the wider organisation, and the equipment. And I think it's very important to understand the holistic nature of this. Ravi has alluded to the fact that the pilot ladder is just one element of this, but this is an end-to-end process that, in my view, starts in the office and finishes in the office. And there are many steps and links along the way which we all have to come to understand. Conceptually, safety is a system property, not a component property. The component that we're talking about being pilot ladders, but the pilot ladders are part of a system. It must be dealt with at a system level, not a component level. Just like to hark back to the outcome of the Piper Alpha investigation, Lord Cullen actually came up with a recommendation which has since been implemented in the offshore industry, but never really comprehensively in the shipping industry. I won't read this, but I'll just leave it here for a few minutes. But essentially, the safety case is a framework which describes how work must be done to deliver safe outcomes for all personnel involved. The safety case framework was the framework that we selected at Australian Reef Pilots for our overall SMS, and it was most certainly the framework that we selected for developing safe pilot transfer procedures. As I said, the pilot ladder is just one component of a holistic pilot transfer operational system, but there are many other elements. The pilot vessels and its associated equipment, the pilot vessel crew, the ship's crew, the shoreside personnel and the organisation behind it. And I'm sure Janine will be talking about that as well. The marine environmental factors impacting the operation, port infrastructure, the regulatory environment, and the procedures which are documented to describe the safety case and how that safety case is implemented. It's a fairly brief list. I'm sure there is a lot more. And the feedback that we get from this webinar will be very important to flesh all of these issues out. One thing that we thought was particularly important when we developed our safety case was that we understood that it is very case specific and organisation specific. It's not a one size fits all. For example, if you talk about marine environment, some ports operate in some very hazardous offshore conditions, and in Australia I'm certainly aware of places like Port Phillip where there's a very wild bar which has claimed lives in the past. There's Columbia River Bar in the United States. And I'm sure there are other places in India which are equally as hazardous. So each safety case has to be developed based on a process of hazard identification at each port. That's one of the underlying principles of the safety case, is that it's a proactive approach to safety which requires all of the hazards to be identified in advance. So, and the way we did this was through extensive workshops and seminars and research about other incidents from our local environment, from around Australia, from around the world, in fact, and even reaching out into other industries, other hazardous industries, such as, for example, road transport, aviation, even the medical industry. And I've come up with a pretty brief list here of some of the hazards that we identified. So the personal embarkation and disembarkation at the port. We had quite a few accidents with persons getting on and off the pilot boat at wharves and jetties and other types of port infrastructure. And that's a really important issue. And in fact, we'd had some fairly serious injuries in that part of the operation. Personnel motions during the pilot vessel voyage. Impact on the human body is a very well-known health hazard. The US Coast Guard and the US Navy has done a lot of work around this, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on. Consideration about heavy weather operations, particularly relevant to you guys in India during the monsoon season, which we also share similar conditions. Pilot vessel design, issues like handling, seaworthiness, maintenance, those types of things. Operating in poor visibility, particularly sea fog. Inadequate nav aids. Traffic scheduling and fatigue management, and all of the commercial pressures to get a pilot on and off a ship when the ship wants a pilot. That's an incredibly important issue. The lack of personnel training right across organisations, and it's not only in our pilotage organisations, but on board ships, it's ashore in the port organisations, it's across our industry. Unfitness for duty, and that is of particular relevance to pilots when they encounter the pilot ladder task, but it's also relevant to boat operational crew, managers and all other people in our industry. And then, of course, the not-so-elephant in the room, this big issue of non-compliant pilot ladders, which I guess triggered this webinar. So some of the key requirements to improve the safety of pilot transfer. And again, this is a pretty brief list. There's a lot more to it, but safe means of personnel access at the port, including in the case of medical evacuation. And again, I'm sure Janine can add to this, but it's very, very important that not only under normal conditions that be safe, but under abnormal emergency conditions. So evacuating injured personnel from vessels returning from sea to the port can be a lifesaver. Optimising vessel design to minimise accelerations, reducing impacts on the human body. And all of the work that I have read about this, it's an incredibly important issue. The continual impacts that the human body is subjected to during the course of professional careers is life-shortening. Spinal injuries, all sorts of joint conditions, and the long-term effects of that sort of exposure. It's life-shortening, but even during life, it really can present very restrictive conditions on people. And I've got some very, very close friends and colleagues who have suffered from this. So I can't overemphasise the importance of that from a design point of view and an engineering point of view.
Simon?
Yes.
2 minutes, 2 minutes.
Okay. There are a whole bunch of other issues there, and this PowerPoint will, I'm sure, be left and posted on the website for people to reflect on. And I think that each issue needs a separate workspace developed around it and bodies of experts to make contributions and procedures written. The issue of non-compliant ladders. The most effective measure that I've been identified is quite simply saying no. That comes down to you guys, the pilots. When presented with a non-compliant ladder, it is within your power to simply refuse to board that ladder until it's rectified. There are ports in Australia where that is the norm, and I'd say that Port Kembla Port would have been the leader in that field. There have been a few pilots who led that charge, and just that simple word no has been a game changer in our industry in Australia. It's very, very difficult in a commercial environment to do that. And the people who say no need support within their organisation all the way to CEO and board level. And to me, that's the most important thing. Say no. There are those other issues there, and a lot of it comes down to training, communication. And on a final note, in my research, I've discovered that there have actually been more serious injuries and deaths to ship crew in rigging pilot ladders than there have been to marine pilots in boarding or disembarking. And a very, very serious issue. So this is industry-wide. It's not just about pilots. It's about all maritime personnel involved in this very much, everyone.
Thank you, Simon. All right, Janine, could you please do the next presentation?
Okay, Rob, you're going to have to keep me on track for time. I'm just
Okay,
going to try and share my screen now, okay?
Okay, I'll do that.
When it shows up.
Okay. I think they'll have to invite you later on to do a full webinar for what you've got.
That'd be a good idea. Okay. Is my PowerPoint showing now?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Are you seeing it in presentation mode or speaker mode?
Both.
In both, is it?
We're seeing your speaker notes, Janine.
What about now?
Now we are right. Thank you.
Now? Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. I'll get started. Thank you, Ravi, and thank you all Indian Marine Pilots Association for inviting me to share my recent experiences with improving safety initiatives regarding marine pilot vessel transfer. I'll just quickly show you some background on the port where I do work and where many of you probably had occasion to visit over the years.
Newcastle is the largest port by tonnage on the Australian east coast. Marine pilots from the Port Authority of New South Wales handling close to 5,000 shipping movements every year. Helicopters are used for the bulk of pilot transfer operations in and out of Newcastle. 80% of all transfers are via chopper, the remaining 20% by pilot cutter. Built in 2011, the Pilot Cutter is a state-of-the-art 16.8 metre Camargue design.
So I'm not going to take a lot of time to discuss the details of pilot ladder design, rigging or compliance because they're very important issues and they can be better articulated with other experts on these panels. I will, however, focus on why the continual improvement and sharing of lessons regarding pilot vessel transfer is very important to every marine pilot, vessel master operator, pilotage operator and port regulator around the world. Sadly, it all too often takes a significant incident for real lessons to be learned, shared and improvements actualised. Far too many people have lost their life or been badly injured so that others can learn from their lessons. 2 years ago, I experienced one of those moments where for years our good standing practices and procedures have served us well and yet had to take stock of everything we thought we knew about marine pilot transfer after one of our very experienced pilot team members was badly injured and lucky to be alive after a fall from the pilot ladder. The fall occurred at the very critical moment, as many of you can appreciate, during the pilot transfer, where the weight between the pilot vessel deck and the ladder, with 1 foot between the two for that split second, and it only takes the boat to drop away suddenly and unexpectedly in the swell to test the upper body strength to hold that ladder. And unfortunately, with the shock loading being experienced on this pilot's arms, he had no choice but to let go of the ladder, hoping to land on the pilot vessel deck below. However, the deck did continue to fall into the trough of the wave, and to him it felt like an eternity before he landed heavily and awkwardly on that deck, knowing he was badly injured.
Sorry to interrupt you, Janine. The screen is only half. The presentation is not being seen fully. Please, could you have a look at that?
The slides are only half seen. Huh? Janine, please
okay.
can you...
Let me see what I can do for that. That might show the presenter notes though.
Yes, but we can see your this thing as well, your notes as well. So there is a way to, otherwise it's fine. I mean, as long as people can see, because
half the slides might be better because I'll try and get the video to work later on. Okay.
Yeah, but this is only a half slide.
Or is it too annoying?
Okay, this happens when you have two screens. It's okay. Just go on the presentation mode and you continue.
Okay. Instead today...
Swap your screen. Swap your screen.
This one?
Yeah, this. Yeah, okay. Just continue. That's all right.
Okay. How's it?
Yeah.
Okay. So instead today, I intend to leave you with the associated learnings, not just sparked from this particular incident, but from all the incident reports we review, as well as our own initiatives for continual improvement and reassessing how we do what we do and why we do it the way we do it. I hope that this leaves you all to consider how you may use some of this knowledge to reassess your own operations and continually improve the best practices for this safety critical work around the world. The medical attention and recovery of the pilot in that particular incident was priority, but right alongside that was the importance of launching an immediate ICAM, an incident control analysis method. The method adopts the holistic, systematic safety investigation principle, identifying both local factors and failures within the broader organisation that contributed to the incident. Such things as communication, training, operating procedures, incompatible goals, change management, organisational culture and equipment. Through the analysis of this information, we were able to identify what really went wrong and to make the necessary recommendations for remedial actions to reduce risk and build error-tolerant defences against future incidents. This took us right back to the process of how to eliminate the risk. And since the act of pilotage is compulsory and essential, we must continue to transfer marine pilots to vessel. And we had in our port introduced helicopter operations 20 years ago for this very reason. Yet when vessels are unsuitable for helicopter or the helicopter cannot fly, we must use pilot vessel and further investigated possibilities regarding restraint or arrestor systems that could be used in pilot ladder climbing, and found both in Australia and overseas that there is still nothing suitable for this purpose. Without elimination, we are left with ensuring we have robust processes, training, and methods to effectively and safely reduce these hazards. While we have increased safety prevention measures for many years and incorporated this into pilot PPE, operations and vessel design, such things as tethering on deck, persons overboard recovery systems, auto-inflating life jackets with self-activating AIS satellite positioning devices, and good procedures for checking pilot ladder compliance. Yet when taking this holistic, systematic review, we were able to learn so much more. We looked at our operation in two aspects. What are our risk mitigators that are preventing things going wrong in pilot transfer? And separately, in the unlikely event that things don't go to plan, we consider the appropriate responsive mitigators, such as enough training, equipment, and process to be able to have the best possible outcome in those unfortunate events. We reviewed and updated procedures to ensure adopting best practices and consulted widely, collaborating internally with our other ports and that externally of other pilotage service providers. And I want to thank Simon Meyjes for that excellent support that he gave us at that time. We immediately adopted a formalised traffic light system for go or no go in marginal conditions or at any other time deemed necessary. We can constantly review our weather data against operational requirements such as small loaded vessels or large ballasted capesize so as to identify our upper limit conditions for each vessel, as well as green, always okay, yellow needs additional dynamic risk assessment to proceed, and the red of no go. We operate in very challenging conditions with opposing swell and weather. And we need to train our pilots and pilot vessel crews to be empowered to say no when it is not safe to transfer. We reduced review of our high risk activities to no more than 12 months. And we encourage and expect external experts to assist us with that review. Throughout this process over the last 2 years, we've brought together pilot representatives and managers, people from across our ports, and brought in external expertise to assist with workshops to review our current process for the pilot ladder training, marine pilot health standards, PPE, and checked what we were doing was going well and identified where we can continue to improve. We found that there was improvements to be made in footwear for non-slip SRC rating and glove design. Our medical practitioners, along with an exercise physiologist, contributed to reviewing health standards so as to ensure functional health assessments match the task required. They also identified best techniques for ladder climbing, disembarking that minimise injury to pilots over many years of doing this task. We've developed video material to assist authorised medical health.
2 minutes.
How many, Ravi? 2
minutes, I said.
Okay, oh my God, not long. Okay, quick. And that's going to be included in the next review. I'm just going to skip a couple of slides. So you can see here our responsive measures included looking at the deck where we fall, removing obstructions and protection by putting in foam. We also considered our pilotage medical equipment on board to be able to deal with an emergency and the training that was required by our crews and marine pilots to deal with trauma when offshore. We've also looked at rubber decking to be able to go on future pilot vessels because they need to be incorporated from design. We made hard hat wearing, issued head protection to all of our marine pilots. In this video, you'll be able to see how we conducted real live tests with our life jackets to ensure that the marine helmets were appropriate for the use and did not create any other injuries to someone. And the important bit is we've taken all of this information and turned it into an online training package. Unfortunately, I can't share that with you because it's not stabilized on a website yet, but I've been able to take some screenshots of what it contains. And so we have a system of training now for new pilots and refresher for current pilots, where it's a combination of e-learning, interactive e-learning online, and then our on-water climbing in our shed, and then also on water. So I'll just step through a few of these slides with you if you can see them. You'll be able to see different aspects. Part of our training is also to ensure reporting of defective pilot ladders, so that either through the AMSA app with our national regulator or through our internal marine reporting, we can follow up with vessel masters and operators to improve pilot ladder defects for the next time those ships may call. You'll also see in the training package, it goes through the required climbing technique, the fitness for work, PPE, the ladder access, embarking and disembarking, and the different types of ladders. So we also train in what a compliant ladder should look like. We train in all aspects of our PFD for the personal locating beacon, how to manually inflate, and the other essential equipment that the life jacket carries. You'll see on this picture here with the ladder, the little circles indicate the interactive aspects of the training where we click on that to learn. The form on the left is our internal training that steps through what new pilots need to be deemed competent in our training elements. You'll see a few more screenshots here from the training video. It's an interactive online platform, so it's not essentially a video you sit and watch, you interact with it. And then you take that knowledge of our procedures, our process, our equipment, and you put it into practice on the water in a staged approach, so that you start with observing the pilot transfer first, and then you slowly increase to short ladder climbs, and then to nighttime full weather cape size climbs by the time you're finished. And it would be remiss of me not to pop this last slide up from our very experienced pilot, Malcolm, who presented at the AMPE conference here in Australia last year. And he said, pilots are required to transfer to and from ships at sea nearly every day of their career. Pilot transfer is extremely high risk and inherently dangerous. And sadly, when it goes wrong, the consequences can and usually are devastating. Practice the highest ethos of safety culture and due diligence in your workplace. Be adaptive to change and adopt best practice. Review how you do things and learn from others' misfortune. And I hope one day you all have the opportunity for Malcolm to share his experiences.
We are planning to do that, Janine.
Thank you, Ravi, and thank you for having me present tonight. And
Thank
I'll go through it a little bit slower next time.
Thank you, Janine. Yeah. All right, let's have Captain Sansarchandra Choubey.
Hi, friends, colleagues, and seniors. A very good day to all of you. I'm a proud mariner and even prouder pilot. There are very few professions which give the joy what pilotage, marine pilotage gives to its practitioners. And a lot of topics which I had wanted to cover has already been covered by Simon and Janine. So what I'll do is I'll just go through my PPT a bit faster. Let me know once you can see the screen.
We can. Yep.
Okay. Okay, now you can see a pilot boat going out, and I think most of the people who are sitting in office jobs must be thinking, why not we should be sitting there rather than sitting in an office job. The thrill of pilotage is so immense. There are certain factors which affect safe pilotage. A lot of points have been covered by Simon, like I said. The presentation that I'll be giving is basically totally from the pilot boat and the pilot cruise perspective. I've put myself in their shoe, how they think, how they feel. And please accept my apologies to all the master mariners, to all the pilots, if some of the issues highlighted may not be in agreement with the views held very dearly by some of you. These are the topics which are under consideration. Expectations from the pilot boat and its crew, challenges with respect to vessels, challenges with respect to weather conditions, challenges with respect to the pilot boat design and the crew itself, the training. Simon and Janine both very beautifully, they have explained it. Challenges with respect to the pilot. This is a topic which is not usually discussed, but it has been hinted by Janine as well as Simon in their presentation. And finally, is there any room for improvement? So what are the expectations from the pilot boat and its crew? Being a port operator, Adani are the largest private port operator in the country. There are certain ports where we have pilot ports, and some of the ports where the distances are large, or where we need a tug to go out and make fast very quickly. We have been using tugs for pilot boarding and disembarking. Even the ports where we have pilot boats, and when the weather gets rough and it's not really comfortable being nearly 15 miles out into the sea in a pilot boat bobbing up and down. So in those cases, we use tug for pilot boarding and disembarking. Of course, it's very costly, nearly 3 times more costly from the operational point of view. But we have, in consultation with the management, we had taken decision that if the weather is bad, we'll use a tug rather than a pilot boat. Of course, our tugs are also designed in such a manner that they have the boarding area on the forecastle deck, sort of raised forecastle deck they have, so the pilot can easily board, and from there he can board the vessel. So some of the points, expectations from the pilot boat is they have to provide a safe, comfortable passage to the pilot, because the distance to pilot station can be half an hour or 1 hour, and bad weather, at least the place should be comfortable. Board, disembark the pilot on time. This, I think this is one of the key KPIs which is monitored. I think at other ports also it must be. This is, of course, as far as we are concerned, we monitor it on very closely. What was the time the pilot boarded, and what was the time pilot disembarked, whether it's from the seaside or from the shore side, because that helps us in reducing idling of the assets. And plus, we know that the customer satisfaction is also a very important KPI for us. And for us, getting the pilot on board right on dot is very important. Assist the pilot. The pilot board crew is expected to assist the pilot to disembark and safely board him onto the vessel, remain in touch with the control. And traffic is there, a lot of ports, you have a lot of fishing traffic and other things are there. So he has to keep a very sharp lookout. And then pilot boats, usually they do not follow the channel. They will be slightly out of the channel if it's a busy channel, so that they can, approach channel can be left free for main vessels. And one of the points is providing emergency response. It's a point often overlooked, but in case of an emergency, pilot falling on the deck of the pilot boat or falling into the water, they are the first responders. So certain amount of expertise is required from them. And of course, the final point is they should be very, very cost effective with respect to operation and maintenance. One of the points raised was challenges with respect to vessels. Vessels come in all shape and sizes. In this vessel, boarding a pilot, the boat gets underneath this obstruction and she will damage herself, especially if there's a sea and swell. Then how does the pilot get inside? Like Simon said, the best thing is to say no, because it is very difficult for the pilot boat crew to maneuver the pilot safely and get him on board such vessels. It is next to impossible. So what are the challenges with respect to the vessels? I think some of these are channel with limitations which are there. The vessels are unable to provide a lee. If you have got just a 300-meter channel and if you have to alter course by 15 degrees, you will be out of the channel in no time and you will run aground. So if the pilot is, unless until he is really going out to the sea, and which sometimes the final leg of the passage, the pilot disembarks, especially like I remember in Bombay Harbor, we used to disembark at the Sunk Rock during monsoon season because the pilot cannot disembark once he has crossed that point. So the master is unable to provide the lee because the sea is coming right from ahead, and even 5 or 10 degrees of alteration of course will not help. So there is no way the master can provide that lee. Then there are instances when there is incoming traffic. He cannot alter course or he'll run into the vessel. Even if he can provide the lee by altering 10 degrees, he will not do it. Then instances are there when the vessels are unable to reduce their speed. We have container vessels nowadays who have speed of 8.5, 9 knots, dead slow ahead. Speed is 9 knots. So the vessel is just running away. And if you stop the vessel, there's a beam on wind or current, she starts the course, losing her course. And the master is tempted again to give the engine. So this high boarding disembarking speed is a huge challenge, and poor boarding disembarking arrangements. This has been discussed. I would just stress on the point of the pilot door, or a lot of pilots, they call it the trap door, basically. There are instances when if the vessel is loaded and the sea and swell is there, the pilot boat sometimes gets into that cavity and damages herself, or even for the pilot it is very dangerous because as he has to jump into the pilot door. Communication is another issue. A lot of multinational crew, and you have some crew which are not really proficient in English, and it's not always possible for the pilot or the pilot boat crew to communicate to the vessel crew through the vessel master. Sometimes you need an immediate response, but the understanding of languages, and that becomes another challenge. Of course, then there is some of the challenges which has been discussed. These are with respect to the weather conditions. Head-on sea and swell, and this is, I think, one of the greatest risks which pilots they encounter during piloting operation. The primary reason is the sea and swell conditions. When the seas are very rough, it becomes very, very difficult boarding and disembarking. The decks, they become slippery. The relative motion of the boat with respect to the pilot ladder, just as the pilot is either disembarking or boarding, the boat may sway away from the ladder, and the pilot is left hanging on the pilot ladder. During rough weather, the pilot boat is usually unable to stay alongside, and even the crew, the pilot boat crew, to help the pilot reduces, because they have to take care of themselves rather than taking care of the pilot. With respect to the poor visibility, this is another major challenge. The crew which man the pilot boat are usually not highly qualified, and things have become better with AIS integrated radars and electronic charts. But then there are very few pilot boats which are equipped with such equipment, at least in India. And even if these equipments are there on board, there are not many people who know how to use it. The boat crew. Dense fog and rain again makes it very challenging for the pilot boat to understand, to safely board and disembark the pilot. Then there are challenges with respect to the pilot boat and its crew itself. And you can see the pilot boat here. Imagine the pilot falling from here. You have all these obstructions around. If he were to fall on any of these, he will break his back or he will hurt himself. And what are the options available? While boarding the pilot, maybe the pilot boat can just move back. But when the pilot is disembarking, he will have to be near the ladder. The boat cannot be away from the ladder. This is a risk which remains. There is a need for redesigning the pilot boat in such a manner that if the pilot were to fall on the deck, it can be cushioned. With respect to the pilot boats, basically designs are poor, they are not standardized, inadequate risk assessment with respect to structures on the boat, then lack of cushioning material on the landing area. But like Janine said, they are working on something. I think rubber deck or something would really help. Then the issues related to inadequate speed of the boats. Like I said, 9 knots is the dead slow ahead for some of the container vessels. You need a boat at least 12 to 15 knots doing cruising speed so that they can catch up with such vessels. Lack of standardized guidelines with respect to pilot boat design. Fatigued crew, the pilot gets on the vessel, then at least he has somewhat better stay on board. He is not encountering the weather, but the pilot crew, poor fellows, they remain there and they are still facing the weather. So that is something which most pilots, they don't appreciate. Monotonous nature of the job, day in, day out, they are doing the same job, and lack of appreciation. I know of very few pilots who go and thank the pilot crew every time they are safely boarded and disembarked from the vessel. There's a lack of camaraderie, I would say. I think no efforts are required to just say a polite thank you. I think that makes it the day for them also. Then one of the points which most people would not discuss is challenges with respect to the pilots themselves. Pilotage is a highly physical and job, and as we grow old, we grow more experienced, but at the same time, we become physically weaker.
Yeah.
Less than perfect eyesight and hearing, slow in our response, and all the points are listed there. It's a fact.
Yes, 2 minutes, please, Captain.
Yeah, it's a fact which we cannot wish away. And climbing the pilot ladder and then going onto the wheelhouse of a container vessel, they have I deck, H deck, and when you go up there, you have to check the vessel's position, and it is really physically demanding. And I think there is a requirement to have a better health monitoring of the pilots. And usually the people who get injured in piloting are the senior pilots, and usually the boat crew also, if they see a risky behavior, they usually are afraid to call it out. Is there room for improvement? Certainly, yes. We can have standardized boat design on the work done by Australian Pilot Association. I think we can have standardized designs. Speed requirements are there. Then some certain sea and swell conditions should be mentioned, beyond which pilot boats should not be used. And there's a need for a specialized training program for the boat crew, setting of physical standards for the pilots, and specifying the minimum PPE requirement. I think if these things are taken care of to a large extent, at least with the risk associated with the pilot boats and the pilot crew can be minimized. But it's an holistic approach has to be taken. And like Simon has said, there is a need to reimagine the entire process. That's it. Thanks a lot from all of you for having invited me. I am open to any queries or any questions which you may have. You can contact me personally also. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Captain Choubey. That was excellent. Okay. All right, the last speaker, Captain Santhosh Rangan.
Thank you, Captain Ravi sir. Introducing myself, this is Captain Santhosh Rangan, sailing master with 3 years of rank experience, presently sailing with Fleet Management Limited, Hong Kong. I've been sailing on oil and chemical tankers from 2010. Moving on, a warm welcome and a massive thanks to all leading personalities of marine industry who delivered their valuable views in this webinar today. I also take the opportunity to thank all the viewers watching this webinar.